Why do people feel so much fear, conflict, and stress? Why do relationships become battles? Why do we feel the need to defend ourselves? What if the root of all of this came from one simple misunderstanding about who we are? Hi, I'm Alina, and I'm a transpersonal coach. Welcome to my channel. Today, we are going to explore a powerful idea: the possibility that most of human suffering begins with the belief that we are separate. Imagine for a moment that our natural state is actually peace, connection, and love. Now imagine that somewhere along the way, the mind developed a belief that says, I am separate, I am on my own, I must survive in a world outside of me. This belief creates a sense of isolation, and once the mind believes it is separate from others, it also begins to believe something else, that it is vulnerable. When we feel vulnerable, the mind starts to operate in a survival mode. And this is where something called the ego begins to take control. The ego is often misunderstood. Most people think that the ego just means arrogance or pride. But psychologically and spiritually, the ego is something much deeper. The ego is the identity built around the idea of separation. It constantly reinforces thoughts like, I am different from others, I need to protect myself, I need to prove my worth. Because of this, the ego's primary emotion is fear. It sees the world as a place where it must defend itself. And when the mind operates from fear, many other emotions appear: anger, jealousy, competition, defensiveness, and all of these are different expression of the same root feeling: fear of being separate and vulnerable. But fear isn't the only emotion that appears. Another powerful emotion often hides beneath the surface, that is guilt. When the mind believes it has separated itself from love or connection, it can feel deep down like something has gone wrong. This creates an unconscious sense of guilt. But the mind doesn't like to feel guilty. So instead of looking at that feeling directly, it does something interesting. It projects the guilt outward. Projection is one of the mind's main defense mechanisms. Instead of thinking, I feel insecure, the mind thinks, they are judging me. Instead of thinking, I feel afraid, the mind thinks, they are attacking me. In this way, the mind places its own uncomfortable feelings onto others. Suddenly, the problem appears to be outside of us. And this is how conflict begins. People defend themselves, attack each other, and misunderstand one another. But underneath it all, the real issue often starts inside the mind. And here's another interesting idea: the more we defend ourselves psychologically, the more we reinforce the belief that we are under attack. Think about it. If you constantly feel the need to protect your identity, your opinions, or your image, your mind starts to assume that something is always threatening you. In other words, defense strengthens fear. But what if your true nature was never actually threatened in the first place? What if peace didn't require constant protection? Peace begins when the mind starts to question the belief in separation, when we recognize that much of our fear comes from misinterpretation. Something powerful happens. We begin to see others differently. Instead of seeing enemies or threats, we begin to see people who are also acting from fear or confusion. And this is where forgiveness becomes possible. Forgiveness doesn't mean approving harmful behavior. It means understanding that many actions come from misunderstandings and fear. When we release the need to attack or defend, the mind naturally becomes calmer. and peace begins to return. So, the next time conflict appears in your life, try asking yourself a different question. Instead of asking, who is right? Ask, what fear might be driving this situation? When we look beyond the surface of conflict, we often discover that the mind is simply trying to protect itself. And the moment we recognize that, we open the door to something much deeper: clarity, understanding, and peace. See you in the next video.